Welcome to a journey through one of history's most devastating natural disasters. Before we step into the frozen hell of March 1888, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment and tell me your location and what time it is there. Are you settling in for the night in California, starting your morning in London, taking a lunch break in Tokyo? This story transcends time and geography, connecting us all through the universal human experience of survival against impossible odds. Whether you're bundled up in winter somewhere or enjoying summer warmth, you're about to experience the bone-chilling terror of the great blizzard of 1888 that brought the mighty city of New York to its knees. So grab something warm to drink, get comfortable, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're joining us from. Your location might be thousands of miles and over a century away from 1888 New York, but the human spirit you're about to witness knows no boundaries of time or place. Now close your eyes and step back with me to March 11th, 1888. You stand at the edge of history's most merciless winter storm. March 1888. New York City. Feel the cobblestones beneath your boots. Hear the clatter of horse-drawn carriages echoing off brownstone walls. Breathe in the sharp morning air that carries promises of catastrophe. The city pulses around you with its usual rhythm. Children dart between your legs, chasing hoops down crowded streets. Vendors shout their wares while women hurry past, market baskets swinging. You feel alive in this bustling metropolis, unaware that within hours, everything you know will vanish beneath nature's white fury. Look around you now. See the chimney sweep's boy scrambling up a fire escape, his face already blackened with soot. Watch the flower girl on the corner, her voice lilting as she calls, "Fresh violets, sweet violets," to passers-by who barely spare her a glance. Notice the businessman in his fine wool coat, gold watch chain glinting as he strides purposefully toward the financial district, leather briefcase swinging at his side. You smell the mingled aromas of the city, fresh bread wafting from bakeries, the acrid scent of coal smoke, the earthy smell of horses and their droppings, the salt tang carried on winds from the harbour. Your ears are filled with a symphony of urban life, the cry of newsboys hawking papers, the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on stone, the distant whistle of a ferry, the grinding screech of elevated train wheels on metal tracks. Before we plunge into the frozen hell that awaits, pause here with me. Whether you're listening in America as night falls, or in Europe where dawn breaks, or anywhere else in this vast world, this moment belongs to all of us. The story demands your presence. Hit that like button, subscribe for more journeys through time's darkest hours, and tell me in the comments where you're experiencing this tale from. Take a moment to really feel this city alive around you. You're standing on the precipice of one of the most devastating natural disasters in American urban history. In just hours, this vibrant, breathing metropolis will be transformed into a frozen wasteland. The very people brushing past you now, the merchant counting coins, the mother pulling her child close, the dock worker heading home after a long shift, they have no idea what's coming. Now, breathe deep. Let shadows gather around you. Feel time sliding backward as we step together into the streets of New York City, moments before the storm that would bring a great metropolis to its knees. You walk through the early March morning completely unsuspecting. The wind bites harder than usual, yes, but you felt worse. You watch ferries slice through harbour waters, their whistles shrieking against the piers. Above your head, elevated trains spark and screech along iron tracks, while horse-drawn trolleys roll steadily past. carrying clerks and dock workers to their daily toil. But wait, look closer. Do you see those clouds gathering in the unnatural shapes? Taste how the air has grown brittle, sharp against your tongue. This stillness feels wrong, doesn't it? Outside the city, farmers watch birds flying lower than they should, desperately searching for food. Sailors along the docks tighten their ropes, sensing change in their bones. These are whispers you might have heard if you'd been listening. But like most New Yorkers, you ignore the warnings. That evening, gaslights flicker warmly in tenement windows around you. Broadway's lamps dance in the growing wind. Newspapers mention snow coming. An inch or two, nothing more. You tuck yourself into bed, never imagining that by morning your world will be unrecognizable. Step closer to the people around you. Meet Thomas Murphy, an Irish dock worker whose calloused hands have unloaded cargo for 15 years. He pulls his thin coat tighter as he walks home to his wife Margaret and their 3 children in a cramped tenement on the Lower East Side. The cold seeps through his worn boots, but Thomas has known worse hardships. He thinks only of the warm supper waiting and the stories his youngest daughter will want him to tell. Follow Mary Kellerman, a seamstress hurrying to deliver a wedding dress before dark. Her fingers are already numb from the cold, but she clutches the precious package, weeks of careful work that will feed her family for a month. The wind tugs at her shawl as she navigates the crowded sidewalks, her mind on the coins she'll receive and the rent that's already 3 days overdue. Watch Dr. Henry Davidson as he makes his evening rounds in his horse-drawn carriage. His medical bag sits beside him, filled with laudanum, quinine, and the other limited remedies of the age. He's been called to treat a fever in the tenements, always a delicate matter in these overcrowded buildings where disease spreads like wildfire. The good doctor has no idea that by tomorrow he'll be treating frostbite and exposure instead. See little Catherine O'Brien, just 7 years old, pressing her nose against the window of Muller's bakery. The warm glow inside beckons, and she can smell fresh bread and sweet pastries. Her stomach rumbles. Dinner at home will be thin soup and yesterday's bread. But Mrs. Muller sometimes gives her a day-old roll if she sweeps the front steps. Catherine doesn't know that this simple act of kindness will soon become a matter of life and death. These are the souls who will face the storm's fury alongside you. Remember their faces, their hopes, their small worries that seem so insignificant now. For in the hours to come, survival will strip away all pretense, and these strangers will become your companions in one of nature's most terrifying displays of power. March 11th, 1888. Dawn breaks like pewter across the sky. You wake to heavy clouds pressing down on the city as if trying to smother it. Then you see them, the first snowflakes, drifting like delicate lace through the morning air. They settle on iron railings, on the shoulders of men walking past your window, on the brims of ladies' hats. You smile. Snow isn't foreign to New York. This light March dusting seems almost charming. Watch the children tilt their faces skyward, catching flakes on their tongues. But the flakes don't stop. They thicken, multiply, become insistent. The wind rises, sending them dancing sideways. By mid-morning you slip on the streets that have grown treacherous. Carriage wheels spin uselessly while horses strain against their loads. Street sweepers battle in vain to keep the thoroughfares clear. The snow no longer kisses your skin. It stings, bites, forces you to squint as the air turns bitter cold. At the ferry slips you hear men muttering as the East River swells with angry waves. Commuters from Brooklyn clutch their coats tighter, eyes narrowed against flakes that seem to attack rather than fall. The elevated train platforms glaze with frost. Even the iron girders groan in the sudden cold. A late snowstorm, people say around you, pulling scarves higher. It will pass by nightfall. But you feel a creeping unease. Shops remain open, schools continue, gas lamps flicker bravely in the growing dimness. Yet as you watch, the snow deepens with each passing hour. The flakes no longer drift. They slash sideways, carried by winds that whistle through alleyways like the voices of the dead. The city that welcomed grey skies this morning now disappears beneath a curtain of white. And still, this is only the beginning. You witness the city's transformation in real time. The milk wagon that passed your window just an hour ago now struggles through what were once clear streets. The driver, bundled in layers, lashes his reins against horses whose coats are already white with accumulating snow. Their hooves slip and slide on cobblestones that have become mirrors of ice. Watch as shopkeepers begin to notice. Mr. Goldstein emerges from his dry goods store, shaking his grey head at the thickening curtain of white. He's seen 40 winters in this city, but something about this storm feels different. His wife calls from inside. Customers are asking questions, voices tinged with worry. Should they head home early? Should they stock up on supplies? In the telegraph office on Broadway, operators bend over their keys, fingers flying as messages pour in from outlying areas. Weather reports from Albany speak of unprecedented snowfall. Philadelphia reports similar conditions. But the operators don't realize that within hours their own lines will be silenced. Their connection to the outside world severed like arteries cut clean. Feel the city's pulse changing around you. The hurried footsteps of morning commuters slow and become more deliberate. Conversations between strangers spring up. Have you ever seen snow like this? How deep do you think it will get? The easy confidence of city dwellers begins to crack like ice on a warming pond. By late afternoon, you experience the snow's true fury. What began as gentle beauty now roars against the city with a violence that terrifies even seasoned New Yorkers. Wind screams down Broadway, tearing at your hat and coat, swirling snow into blinding sheets that make you stumble blindly forward. Windows rattle in their frames around you. Shutters bang violently against brick walls like gunshots. The sound becomes a constant howl, nature's voice reminding you of your fragility. On the streets, you watch carriages falter. Horses, their breath rising in white plumes, balk and stumble as drifts pile against their legs. Drivers shout, but the storm swallows their calls. Wheels lock, carts overturn, and you find yourself disoriented in streets you've known all your life. Familiar landmarks vanish beneath swirling whiteness. The city is being erased and redrawn with snow before your eyes. The ferries surrender first. By early evening, the East River has become so violent that captains dare not cross. The slips, once alive with whistles and shouts, stand eerily quiet. You stand with other stranded commuters, staring helplessly across water as the opposite shore disappears into the blizzard's shroud. Inside homes and boarding houses around you, lamps glow faintly against frosted panes. Families gather closer to their stoves, listening to the storm batter the walls. Conversations grow hushed. The newspaper's casual forecast now seems like a cruel joke. This is no ordinary snowfall. Night descends, though it's hard to tell when daylight ends. The skies have been dark and oppressive since morning. You slip into a strange twilight, lit only by the dim flicker of gas lamps struggling against the swirling white. Their glow reaches only a few feet before vanishing into the storm, casting eerie halos in the darkness. The streets, once busy and alive, grow silent except for the wind's howling. Drifts rise higher than doorsteps, pressing against shop fronts and burying signs. You discover that doors opening inward are a blessing, while those opening outward are blocked by walls of snow. Horses stand abandoned by their drivers, trembling, icicles clinging to their manes. The few pedestrians still caught outside bend double against the gale, scarves stiff with frost, eyelashes crusted with ice. You might be one of them, struggling forward step by agonizing step. Inside, families huddle together while walls groan, as if the buildings themselves strain under the storm's weight. Coal stoves burn fiercely, but cold creeps through every crack, a steady, unyielding presence. Children are tucked beneath extra quilts while parents whisper anxiously about dwindling supplies and the dangers of leaving home. But some have no shelter at all. You see them, the poor, the homeless, those stranded between destinations seeking refuge in doorways, beneath stairwells, in corners of train stations, anywhere to escape the cutting wind. For them the night stretches long and merciless, snow burying their shapes in quiet layers. Above it all the storm rages without mercy. Snow falls not in flakes but in torrents, a white wall consuming the city. The great blizzard of 1888 has arrived in full force, and New York sinks beneath its weight. Now picture Thomas Murphy, that Irish dock worker you met earlier. He made it home just as the storm truly began, but now he sits by his window, watching snow pile against the glass. His wife Margaret boils the last of their potatoes while their children huddle together on the thin mattress they all share. The coal bucket is nearly empty, and Thomas knows that tomorrow he won't be able to work. The docks will be impassable. But tonight, his family is safe and warm, and that's all that matters. Down the street, Mary Kellerman clutches her payment for the wedding dress. Precious coins that will keep her family fed for weeks. She made the delivery just in time, running through streets already ankle-deep in snow. Now she sits mending clothes by candlelight, her fingers moving automatically while she listens to the wind howl outside. Every few stitches she glances at her sleeping children, pulling their blankets higher. Dr. Davidson is still out in the storm. His horse struggles through drifts that reach the poor animal's belly, but there are patients to tend. A woman in labour in the 5 Points, a child burning with fever in Little Italy. The doctor's black bag bounces beside him as he coaxes his horse forward, knowing that every step could be their last. But duty calls, and he'll answer until the storm makes it impossible. Little Catherine O'Brien managed to sweep Mrs. Muller's steps before the snow made it impossible. The kind baker pressed a warm loaf into her arms and a penny into her palm, enough to buy milk for her baby brother. Now she sits in their tiny room above the tailor shop, breaking the bread into small pieces to make it last, while her mother rocks the crying infant. The wind rattles their single window, but Catherine feels rich tonight with bread in her belly and the penny safely hidden beneath their mattress. Midnight strikes, and you no longer recognize your city. Streets that bustled with wagons and footsteps just hours ago now lie buried under mountains of snow. Broadway looks less like a grand thoroughfare and more like a frozen canyon, its buildings half concealed by drifting walls of white. The air is so thick with snow that sound itself seems smothered. Even the constant rumble of elevated trains has gone silent, their tracks choked and abandoned. Only the wind remains alive, shrieking around corners, rattling loose shutters, whistling through gaps in closed windows. It sculpts drifts into strange shapes, arches, ridges, curling spires that lean like frozen waves ready to crash. Lampposts stand half buried, their light barely visible above the storm, casting ghostly shadows that waver in the blowing snow. Here and there a lone figure still struggles onward, perhaps you among them, wrapped in wool and desperation. Your boots sink deep with each step. Progress is measured in inches rather than blocks. Some carry lanterns that sway dimly in the gale, flames sputtering as if ready to surrender. Others abandon the fight altogether, stumbling into churches or taverns whose doors remain open as havens against the cold. But for most of the city there is no more movement. Windows are darkened, doors bolted, fires tended as best they can be. The city that never seemed to sleep has been forced into stillness, wrapped in the suffocating silence of snow. In the basement of St. Patrick's Cathedral, Father O'Malley tends to a growing crowd of refugees. The sanctuary above is already full, so he's opened the crypt below. Candles flicker between ancient tombstones as families huddle together on rough blankets. The priest moves among them with words of comfort and cups of thin broth made from the church's emergency stores. "This too shall pass," he whispers to a young mother whose baby cries weakly in her arms. But even Father O'Malley wonders if his words are true. At the Astor House Hotel, the lobby has become a makeshift camp. Guests who paid for rooms share their space with strangers who stumbled in from the storm. The hotel manager, Mr. Pemberton, has thrown open the dining room, serving whatever the kitchen can prepare to anyone who needs it. Rich merchant and poor labourer sit side by side at mahogany tables, united by the storm's democracy of survival. In the basement of Macy's department store, night watchman Samuel Weber tends a coal stove surrounded by mannequins draped in the latest fashions. The irony isn't lost on him. These wooden figures wear finer clothes than most of the people freezing in the streets above. He's already decided that when morning comes, if morning comes, he'll unlock the doors for anyone seeking shelter, consequences be damned. Down in the Bowery, where the city's poorest make their homes, the storm reveals both the worst and best of humanity. In some tenements, landlords bar their doors against neighbours in need. But in others, like Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house, every room is opened, every scrap of food shared. She's taken in 3 families already, and her own children sleep on the floor so strangers can have beds. In the early hours of March the 12th, you witness the elevated railways, once the proud veins of the city standing frozen. Iron tracks lie buried under ice and snow. Trains that set out optimistically in the morning are now stranded, their carriages abandoned or filled with shivering passengers who have no choice but to wait. Wheels are locked in place, iron grinding uselessly against rails. Even the strongest engines cannot push through the towering drifts. You might be among passengers trying to force open doors, only to meet walls of snow pressed like barricades against the cars. A few manage to climb down, stumbling into the storm, but the streets below offer no safety. The platforms high above the city have become prisons of iron and ice, where wind strikes without mercy. Down in the stations, people crowd into waiting rooms. Stoves glow red but barely keep the cold at bay. Mothers wrap shawls around their children. Men stamp their boots to bring life back to frozen toes. Newspaper vendors pass out extra editions, sheets of newsprint that quickly double as makeshift blankets. At great depots like Grand Central, confusion reigns. Telegraph lines have begun to fail, and trains that should carry passengers out of the city never arrive. You pace the platforms with other anxious travellers, peering into the blizzard as if expecting the dark shape of a locomotive to suddenly emerge. But nothing comes. The iron machines that once symbolized progress and speed have been silenced. The blizzard has stopped them cold, leaving thousands stranded in a city shrinking by the hour into a snowbound island. On the 3rd Avenue L, car number 47 sits motionless between stations, packed with 43 passengers who boarded that morning expecting a routine commute. The conductor, James McBride, has been burning newspapers in a metal wastebasket to provide what little heat he can. Among his passengers are bank clerk William Morrison, who left his warm breakfast to catch this train, seamstress Elena Rossetti, worried about the piecework waiting at the factory, and young Timothy Walsh, just 14, making his first solo trip to visit his grandmother in Harlem. As the hours pass, these strangers become allies. Morrison shares sandwiches from his lunch pail. Rossetti tears strips from her petticoat to help bandage Mrs. Chen's frostbitten fingers. Timothy, small and quick, squeezes through a partially opened window to scoop snow for drinking water, despite the older passengers' protests about the danger. Conductor McBride makes a decision that could cost him his job. He breaks open the emergency supply box, distributing railway lanterns and the company's wool blankets to his charges. "The railroad can fire me come spring," he mutters to Morrison, "but they can't fire a dead man, and that's what we'll all be if we don't keep each other warm." Down in the Grand Central waiting room, a strange democracy emerges. Mrs. Abigail Whitman, wife of a prominent banker, finds herself sharing a bench with Bridget O'Sullivan, an Irish maid. Their initial discomfort melts away as they combine their resources. Mrs. Whitman's flask of brandy and Bridget's packet of soda crackers, to help revive an elderly man who collapsed from the cold. Station Master Harold Fitzpatrick faces impossible choices. The coal for the waiting room stoves is running low, and he's already had to close the main terminal to conserve heat in the smaller spaces. He knows there are hundreds more people struggling through the storm outside, but if he opens the doors now, the little warmth they have will be lost, and everyone might freeze. As dawn struggles to rise on March the 12th, you see the East River, normally restless and alive with ferries and cargo ships, lying choked with ice. Wind has driven sheets of frozen water together, cracking and grinding them until the current seems to vanish beneath a jagged white skin. Ferries that dared the crossing the night before are now trapped, their decks coated in snow, smokestacks iced over. Some sit anchored mid-river, crews huddled below deck, unable to move forward or return. The slips along Manhattan's edge are deserted, silent except for the creak of frozen ropes pulling against wooden posts. You stand with other longshoremen, hands shoved deep in pockets, staring at the icebound water with disbelief. For Brooklyn commuters, the river has become a barrier that cannot be crossed. Thousands who rely on ferries to reach Manhattan are cut off entirely. Some attempt to walk across ice-choked stretches, only to find the surface treacherous, breaking beneath their weight. Rescue crews patrol the shores, pulling desperate men back to safety, their voices quickly swallowed by the storm. Ships anchored in the harbour fare little better. Snow piles high on decks, sails hang stiff as boards, rigging groans under layers of ice. New York has always been a city bound by its waters, but now those waters have turned into walls of ice. Manhattan is trapped, encased by snow above and frozen river below, its lifelines severed. The ferry Manhattan, under Captain Daniel Morrison, attempted one last crossing as the storm intensified. Now it sits locked in ice halfway between the Brooklyn and Manhattan shores, its 47 passengers and crew trapped in a metal shell surrounded by freezing water. The captain has ordered all unnecessary movement stopped to conserve body heat, and the passengers huddle in the main cabin around two small coal stoves. Among them is Rebecca Steinberg, returning from visiting her sister in Brooklyn with her infant son. The baby's cries have grown weaker throughout the night, and Rebecca wraps him closer to her body, sharing her warmth. Beside her, an elderly German immigrant named Otto Brennan shares his thick wool coat, creating a cocoon of shared warmth for mother and child. At the bow of the ship, first mate Patrick Sullivan chips ice from the railings with a hammer, not because it will free them, but because the rhythmic work keeps his blood moving and his mind off their predicament. He's survived storms at sea, but this frozen prison feels more terrifying than any gale he's weathered. Captain Morrison makes rounds every hour checking on his human cargo. He's already distributed the ship's emergency food supplies, hardtack and preserved meat that tastes like leather but provides essential calories. The ship's small medical kit has been exhausted treating frostbite cases, and he fears what will happen if the cold claims anyone during the night ahead. On the Brooklyn side, the Fulton Ferry Terminal has become a refugee centre. Ticket agent Abraham Goldsmith has opened the waiting rooms to anyone seeking shelter, and nearly 200 people now crowd the normally spacious building. The terminal's restaurant, run by the Delancey family, has given away every scrap of food they have, turning their last flour into bread and their final chickens into soup. Mrs. Sarah Delancey moves through the crowd with her daughters, offering what comfort they can. They've set up a makeshift nursery in the ladies' waiting room, where mothers with young children can find some privacy and peace. Her teenage daughter Martha reads stories to frightened children, while her voice competes with the wind howling through the terminal's windows. The terminal's coal supplies are nearly exhausted, and Goldsmith faces a terrible choice: keep the fires burning for warmth, or save fuel for the morning when rescue might be possible. He decides to let the fires burn through the night, knowing it might doom them all come dawn, but unwilling to let people freeze in the darkness. By mid-morning on March the 12th, another lifeline fails: the telegraph lines. For decades, sharp clicks of Morse code have connected New York to the wider world, sending news, orders and reassurances across vast distances in moments. But now, under the weight of ice and fury of the gale, wires snap one by one. You hear them, heavy cords sagging and breaking with sounds like gunshots. Poles lean dangerously in the streets, tops swaying like brittle branches. Some crash down entirely, vanishing into snowbanks with muffled thuds. Others whip violently in the wind, sparking where wires strike against one another. What messages were travelling along those wires? Business deals, family notes, urgent warnings, all vanish into silence. In telegraph offices, operators sit at their tables waiting, fingers poised over keys that click no more. Lines to Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington are gone. For the first time in years, New York finds itself cut off not just from its neighbours, but from the world. Newspapers, always hungry for updates, fall silent too. Without wires, there's no fresh news to print. Citizens accustomed to the constant hum of information are left with rumour. Whispered speculations traded in taverns and boarding houses, each more dire than the last. The blizzard is no longer just a storm, it's a wall of silence, a curtain between New York and the rest of humanity. At the Western Union office on Broadway, Chief Operator Margaret Henley sits before her silent key, tears freezing on her cheeks. She was in the middle of transmitting an urgent message about the storm's severity to the Weather Bureau in Washington when the line went dead. The message was incomplete. Unprecedented snowfall, stop, city, paralyzed, stop, send he, and then nothing. Margaret's assistant, young Robert Chen, climbs the office stairs every hour to check the roof connections, but each time he returns shaking his head. The wires that connected them to the world lie buried under 3 feet of snow and ice, their poles snapped like matchsticks. Margaret keeps tapping out SOS signals into the dead air, hoping that somehow, somewhere, someone might hear their plea for help. Across the city, families wait desperately for word from loved ones. Mrs. Elizabeth Morgan sits by her window, watching for the telegram boy who will never come. Her husband departed for Chicago on business 3 days ago, and his last message promised he'd be home before the storm. She doesn't know that he's stranded in a Philadelphia hotel, frantically trying to send word that he's safe. In the financial district, the Merchants' Exchange has become a nerve center of anxiety. Without telegraph connections, traders cannot confirm stock prices, commodity shipments, or foreign exchange rates. Fortunes hang in the balance, but the storm has rendered money meaningless. Banker Harrison Whitfield stands at his office window, watching snow bury the symbols of commerce, wondering if the economic paralysis will outlast the weather. At the New York Herald building, Editor-in-Chief Jonathan Hartwell faces his first day in 30 years without fresh news to print. His reporters are scattered across the city, trapped by the storm, unable to file their stories. The massive printing presses sit silent and cold. Hartwell makes a decision that will define the newspaper's reputation. They will print survivor stories, lists of shelters, and practical information for storm victims, becoming not just observers, but participants in the city's struggle for survival. The storm has severed more than wires. It has cut the nervous system of a modern city, leaving it blind, deaf, and isolated. Yet in this isolation, New Yorkers are discovering something they had almost forgotten in their rush toward progress: the power of human connection that needs no wires to carry it from heart to heart. By late morning, you navigate streets that have become a labyrinth of snowdrifts and abandoned carriages. Wagons sit half buried, wheels frozen in place, horses long since led away to whatever stables could be found. Some animals have collapsed where they stood, bodies stiff beneath white cover, silent witnesses to the storm's cruelty. You find yourself in a world transformed. Sidewalks vanish beneath banks that rise taller than you. To move forward, you must climb, stumble, and sink again. Every step is a battle against snow that clutches like quicksand. Street signs disappear, landmarks blur. Whole blocks seem to dissolve into the blizzard's endless white. You tie scarves over your mouth, pulling them tight until your breath freezes in the fabric. If you're a woman, you clutch your skirts and lift them high, though it does little to keep snow from seeping into boots and stockings. Children cry as wind whips them sideways, small hands clinging desperately to parents who themselves struggle to stand. When you seek warmth, you duck into taverns, shops, or churches where strangers press close together, shaking snow from coats, faces raw with cold. The interiors glow dimly, candles and stoves fighting against creeping chill that slips through every door. For many, the journey is simply too much. They stop, huddle in doorways or beneath stoops, eyes closing as exhaustion tugs them towards sleep. But in such cold, sleep is more dangerous than the storm itself. The snow does not forgive those who rest. Inside the homes and boarding houses around you, life clings stubbornly to warmth and light. Coal stoves hiss and roar, casting reddish glows that fight back shadows creeping from room corners. Families cluster close, sharing body heat and whispering soft words to calm children whose eyes are wide with wonder and fear. The smell of burning coal mixes with faint scents of damp wool and wet boots, creating an atmosphere both comforting and heavy with the storm's weight outside. Gas lamps flicker as wind presses against glass panes, flames bending and swaying in the draught. In wealthier homes, warmth is steadier. Fires fed with neatly chopped wood, rooms insulated from snow pressing against walls. In tenements and smaller apartments, the battle against cold is harder. Windows rattle, thin walls shiver, and even the thickest blankets sometimes fail to hold chill at bay. Through the night and into morning, families perform quiet rituals of survival. Mothers brew teas and soups, stirring pots slowly over small flames, while fathers clear snow from doorways, attempting to keep some access to the streets. Children, bundled and shivering, play softly with wooden toys or listen as elders tell stories to distract from the biting cold. Every crackle of fire, every tiny glow of light becomes a small victory against the blizzard's relentless power. Yet even here the storm cannot be ignored. Each gust rattling windows reminds you that the world outside is locked in fury. Each drift piling higher against doors whispers of isolation, of a city cut off from its usual rhythm. While many seek refuge in warm homes, hundreds of your fellow New Yorkers have no place to shelter. The city's poor and homeless are forced to confront the blizzard in its full, merciless force. Snow piles over benches, doorways, and alleyways, erasing familiar places where one might usually find rest. Every gust of wind cuts through thin coats and tattered shawls, chilling bodies to the bone. Some seek temporary shelter under building eaves or in recessed steps of brownstones, huddling together for shared warmth. Others try making small fires using scraps of wood or newspapers, only to have flames die quickly in the damp, frozen air. Their faces are etched with exhaustion and determination, eyes scanning constantly for breaks in the storm or buildings that might offer sanctuary. City workers and volunteers do what they can, trudging through deep snow to deliver blankets, food, and words of comfort. But many are simply too far from safety, trapped in streets that have become unrecognizable. The snow swallows footsteps, masking the approach of help until it's almost too late. The cold is not just an inconvenience, it's a silent predator. Fingers and toes numb quickly, breath freezes in the air, and exhaustion threatens to pull even the strongest into sleep from which they might never awaken. In the notorious 5 Points district, where the city's poorest cling to life in crumbling tenements, the storm reveals both humanity's cruelest indifference and its most beautiful compassion. Slumlord Patrick McGillicuddy bars the doors of his buildings against neighbours in need, demanding payment even as people freeze outside his properties. But across the courtyard, Mother Mary Catherine and her Sisters of Charity have opened every room of their mission house. The nuns move through the storm like angels in brown habits, leading the lost and desperate to warmth. Sister Margaret, barely 19 herself, carries an unconscious child through drifts that reach her waist. The boy's lips are blue, his breathing shallow, but she refuses to give up. "Not on my watch," she whispers into the wind, echoing the words Mother Superior used when taking their vows. In the basement of their mission, Mother Mary Catherine has organized a makeshift hospital. The sisters have torn their own bedsheets into bandages and are treating frostbite with whatever remedies they know. Warm compresses, gentle massage, and constant prayer. They've given up their own meals to feed the refugees, surviving on communion wafers and melted snow. Among their charges is Giuseppe Romano, an Italian immigrant who lost consciousness in the storm, and awakened to find himself surrounded by caring strangers who speak no Italian. Language barriers dissolve in the warmth of human kindness. A Sister Agnes tends to his frostbitten feet, and he teaches her Italian words while she shares her rosary beads. Outside the mission, a different drama unfolds. Police Sergeant William Murphy, no relation to the dock worker Thomas, leads a small band of officers on rescue patrols. They've abandoned their regular beats to search for storm victims, knowing that every hour of delay could mean death for someone trapped in the cold. Sergeant Murphy and his men have fashioned sledges from wooden doors, using them to transport the wounded and unconscious to whatever shelter they can find. His partner, Officer Antonio Silva, nearly lost his own life pulling a family of 4 from a collapsed shanty. The structure's roof caved under the snow's weight, but Silva's quick action saved them all. The most challenging case comes when they discover old Benjamin Wright, a Civil War veteran who lived alone in a basement room near the East River. They find him seated in his chair, perfectly still, a gentle smile on his frozen face. In his lap lies a daguerreotype of a young woman, his wife, dead these 20 years. Officer Murphy carefully places the photograph in the old soldier's hands before they carry him away. The discovery of Benjamin Wright affects the entire rescue team profoundly. Sergeant Murphy learns from neighbours that Wright had been a hero at Gettysburg, leading a charge that saved his entire regiment. He survived 3 years of war only to die alone in a blizzard, forgotten by the city he had once fought to preserve. The officers decide that Wright deserves better than a pauper's grave. They carry his body to St. Mary's Church, where Father O'Brien agrees to hold a proper funeral service once the storm passes. Word spreads through the tunnel network about the old soldier's death, and people begin sharing stories of his quiet kindness, how he fed stray cats, helped elderly neighbours with their coal, and never asked for anything in return. The rescue teams encounter many such stories of quiet heroism and tragic loss. In a collapsed shanty near the docks, they find Maria Santos, a young Mexican woman who died shielding her 2 children with her own body. The children survive because their mother's sacrifice kept them warm enough to live until rescue arrived. Officer Silva, himself a Mexican immigrant, weeps openly as he carries the children to safety, promising to ensure they're cared for. In the 5 Points district, they discover an entire family, the O'Briens, who might have survived if they had opened their door to neighbours seeking shelter. Instead, they barricaded themselves inside, hoarding their coal and food while others froze outside. The family died anyway when their chimney became blocked with snow, filling their home with deadly smoke. The rescue team finds them clutched together in a tragic irony of selfishness rewarded with death. But for every tragedy, there are remarkable stories of survival and selflessness. They rescue Mrs. Abuela Martinez, an 80-year-old Spanish woman who kept herself and 5 neighborhood children alive by teaching them to dance. She realized that movement would keep their blood flowing and their spirits up, so she led them in traditional folk dances around a tiny coal stove for 3 days straight. The children are weak but alive, and they remember every step of the dances that saved their lives. The rescue teams also discover innovative survival strategies that will be studied for years to come. In one tenement, they find that residents created a human heating system, with families taking turns to lie in the center of a circle while others surrounded them, sharing body heat in carefully timed rotations. This system, organized by seamstress Anna Kowalski, saved 37 people from freezing. In another building, they discover that Mr. Pavel Novak, a Czech glassblower, used his professional skills to create emergency heating devices from broken bottles and metal scraps. He taught residents to build small furnaces that could burn paper, cloth, and wood scraps safely without creating dangerous smoke. His improvised heating system kept 2 entire floors warm throughout the storm. Perhaps the most remarkable discovery involves the Jewish community around Hester Street, where Rabbi Goldstein organized what he called warmth circles. These were groups of 8 to 10 people who formed human chains, constantly moving in slow circles around small fires. The movement kept blood flowing while the shared body heat amplified the fire's effectiveness. The rabbi drew on ancient Talmudic principles about communal responsibility, showing how religious wisdom could guide practical survival. The rescue team's work becomes increasingly dangerous as they venture into areas where snow has created unstable structures. In the Bowery, Sergeant Murphy's team narrowly escapes when an entire tenement collapses just minutes after they evacuate the last residents. The building had been weakened by years of poor construction, and the snow's weight finally caused total structural failure. Officer Silver develops a technique for testing building stability using sounds and vibrations. He teaches other rescuers to tap walls and listen for hollow echoes that indicate dangerous stress, to watch for subtle shifts in window frames that suggest foundation problems, and to recognize the creaking sounds that warn of imminent collapse. His methods save countless lives as rescue operations expand into increasingly compromised structures. The rescue teams also serve as mobile medical units, with each patrol including someone trained in basic first aid. They carry supplies for treating frostbite, hypothermia, smoke inhalation, and traumatic injuries. Dr. Davidson trains them to recognize the stages of cold exposure and to provide immediate treatment that can mean the difference between life and death. Their most heartbreaking cases involve children separated from parents during the storm. In the tunnel networks, they find dozens of orphaned or lost children who have been cared for by strangers. These young survivors often have no clear memory of their families' names or addresses, making reunification nearly impossible. The rescue teams establish a children's registry, documenting each child's description and any identifying information in hopes of eventual family reunions. The psychological toll on rescue workers becomes evident as the operations continue. These men are witnessing human suffering on a scale none of them imagined possible. Sergeant Murphy writes in his daily report, "Today we saved 16 lives and found 11 bodies. Each death feels like a personal failure, even though I know we cannot save everyone. The living haunt my dreams more than the dead. Their gratitude makes me understand the weight of responsibility we carry." Officer Silver begins showing signs of what modern medicine would recognize as post-traumatic stress. He becomes obsessed with checking and rechecking cleared buildings, convinced he might have missed someone. His partner, Officer McBride, has to physically restrain him from returning to dangerous structures. "We've done what we can," McBride tells him. "We can't save them all, Antonio. We can only save the ones we can reach." The rescue team's heroism extends beyond life-saving to dignity preservation. They ensure that the bodies they recover are treated with respect, carefully documented, and delivered to appropriate religious authorities for proper burial. They understand that in a disaster of this magnitude, maintaining human dignity becomes as important as preserving human life. As the 4th day of the storm begins to wane, the rescue team's efforts intensify. They know that survivors who have made it this far are running out of strength, and the window for saving lives is rapidly closing. Teams work in rotating shifts, with fresh volunteers replacing exhausted rescuers every few hours. The coordination between police, firefighters, medical personnel, and civilian volunteers becomes a model of emergency response that will influence disaster planning for decades to come. But for every tragedy, there are small miracles. They rescue Mrs. Chen and her 3 children from a building where the heat failed completely. The youngest child, barely 2 years old, has stopped crying from the cold, which they know is a dangerous sign. Officer Silver removes his own coat and wraps it around the toddler, carrying the child against his chest to share his body heat. By the time they reach St. Vincent's Hospital, the child is crying again, the most beautiful sound Murphy has ever heard. Dr. Helen Morrison, one of the few female physicians in the city, has turned her private practice into an emergency clinic. Her waiting room overflows with storm victims suffering from frostbite, exhaustion, and exposure. She works without rest, moving from patient to patient with the grim efficiency of a battlefield surgeon. Her most challenging case is a young mother who gave birth during the storm, alone in an unheated apartment. The woman, Maria Santos, walked 2 miles through the blizzard carrying her newborn, desperate to find medical help. Dr. Morrison examines both mother and child by lamplight, amazed that either survived the ordeal. The baby, a girl, enters the world during history's most merciless storm, but she's alive, healthy, and crying lustily. "She's a fighter," Dr. Morrison tells the exhausted mother. "Born in a blizzard, this child will never be defeated by anything life throws at her." They name the baby Hope, and she becomes a symbol of life persisting even in winter's darkest hour. By mid-afternoon on March the 12th, entire streets begin vanishing beneath growing snowdrifts. Doorways that once welcomed families and shopkeepers are now half buried, some nearly swallowed entirely by towering walls of white. You attempt to enter or leave your home, finding yourself shoveling continuously, only to watch wind erase your work almost immediately. Windows are encrusted with ice, patterns of frost forming delicate lace that blurs your view of the storm outside. Inside, candlelight dances against these icy curtains, creating a surreal, dreamlike glow that softens the harsh reality of cold. Each doorway becomes a threshold between warmth and the blizzard's relentless bite. Even for those safely inside, the sight of drifted doorways brings unease. It's a visible reminder that the storm is not merely an inconvenience. It's an overwhelming force, capable of reshaping the familiar world in a single night. You listen to wind pressing against your door, feeling the house tremble, wondering whether the city outside can endure much longer. As the blizzard stretches into its second day, you feel the strain of dwindling supplies. Coal, the lifeblood of warmth, is being consumed faster than deliveries can arrive. In wealthier districts, fires burn bright but require constant tending, the smell of smoke and soot filling rooms already heavy with worry. In tenements and poorer neighborhoods, families face the real threat of running out entirely, forced to ration what little remains. Food too becomes precious. Markets that remained open on the first morning are now shuttered, entrances blocked by snow. You dig through cupboards, planning meals from scraps and leftovers, turning humble ingredients into nourishing soups and stews. For many, each meal is both sustenance and a small victory, a way to push back against cold that seems intent on seeping into every corner of life. Street vendors who once called their wares to bustling crowds now trudge through drifts with carts tipped dangerously under snow's weight. Their voices carry only faintly above the wind, and few have strength or inclination to stop. The city's usual commerce has slowed to a crawl, survival replacing trade as the day's primary concern. Even water becomes a challenge. Pipes freeze, wells grow icy, and fetching liquid requires careful effort and endurance. You balance pails carefully, negotiating drifts, while children watch shivering, hoping for the warmth of a hot drink once you return inside. Through the howling wind, muffled voices begin carrying across snow-covered streets. At first, it's difficult to discern whether they're real or imagined, whispers of hope or desperation. Some come from neighbours calling to one another, checking to see if anyone survived the night, if fires still burn, if warmth remains. Others are cries of stranded pedestrians, lost amid drifts and seeking shelter. The blizzard plays tricks on your ears. A shout might be swallowed instantly, returning only as an eerie echo that seems to come from every direction. Yet within this strange silence, human voices become small beacons, markers of life against the storm's overwhelming power. You press your face to frosted windows listening. Children point and shiver, imagining figures as wandering spirits, while parents murmur reassurances. As March 12th gives way to night once more, the blizzard shows no sign of weakening. In fact, it seems to grow stronger, as if determined to grind the city into complete submission. Snow no longer falls in flakes, but in swirling sheets, racing sideways through streets, driven by winds that roar like the sea. For many, this second night is the hardest yet. The first day was filled with shock and frantic effort, digging, gathering, enduring. But now exhaustion sets in. Your arms ache from shoveling. Your body trembles from hours spent fighting the cold. Even hope feels heavy, sagging beneath the endless weight of white. Inside, families cling closer than before. Fires are stoked higher, blankets layered deeper, conversations grow quieter. Some pray aloud, voices trembling. Others stare silently into flames, wondering when the storm will end, or if it will end at all. The second night brings new trials and unexpected heroes. In a tenement on Orchard Street, seamstress Anna Kowalski organizes her entire building into a survival network. She assigns tasks to everyone. Children gather loose paper and wood scraps for fuel. Teenagers take turns keeping watch for roof collapses. Adults pool their food supplies and cook communal meals over shared fires. Anna's leadership saves lives. When old Mrs. Petrosky's coal runs out, Anna convinces the building's residents to each contribute a few lumps from their own dwindling supplies. When the Antonelli baby develops a dangerous fever, Anna braves the storm to reach Dr. Morrison's clinic 6 blocks away, returning with medicine and instructions for care. Most remarkably, Anna transforms the building's basement into a common area where all the families can gather for warmth. She organizes storytelling sessions for the children, teaching them Polish folk tales while their parents work on survival tasks. Her calm competence and selfless organization turn a building full of strangers into a family, and not a single person in her care is lost to the storm. Meanwhile, in the financial district, a different kind of leadership emerges. Bank President Cornelius Whitney finds himself trapped in his Manhattan office building, along with 30 employees who couldn't make it home. Rather than maintaining social hierarchies, Whitney rolls up his sleeves and works alongside janitors and clerks to keep everyone alive. The bank's vault, ironically, becomes their warmest refuge. Whitney orders the heavy steel door kept open, and the small space retains heat better than the larger offices. He shares his expensive cigars with the security guards and splits his private stock of whiskey among all the adults. When food runs short, he sends his own carriage driver, Murphy O'Brien, on dangerous missions to find supplies. "Money means nothing if we're all dead," Whitney tells his employees as they huddle together in the vault. But if we survive this together, we'll have something more valuable than gold. We'll have proved that human dignity doesn't depend on the size of your bank account. Murphy O'Brien, the carriage driver, becomes an unlikely hero of the financial district. His knowledge of back alleys and shortcuts allows him to navigate the storm better than anyone else. He makes 3 dangerous trips to find food, returning each time with armloads of bread, cheese, and preserved meat, purchased from desperate shopkeepers at premium prices. Whitney pays without question, and Murphy risks his life without hesitation. On his final trip, Murphy encounters a group of children trapped in a collapsed newsstand. The structure fell under the snow's weight, pinning 12-year-old Jake Sullivan beneath wooden boards. Murphy uses his bare hands to dig the boy out, then carries him on his back through chest-deep drifts to reach safety. Jake survives with only minor injuries, but Murphy's hands are so severely frostbitten that Dr. Morrison later fears amputation might be necessary. The storm also reveals unexpected alliances across racial and ethnic lines. In the Chatham Street area, where tensions often run high between different immigrant groups, the blizzard forces cooperation. Irish dock workers, Italian merchants, Chinese laundrymen, and Jewish tailors find themselves sharing the same shelters, the same fires, the same meagre food supplies. Language barriers crumble in the face of shared need. Mrs. Catherine O'Malley, an Irish widow, teaches Italian children English nursery rhymes to keep them calm. Chinese herbalist Mr. Wang shares his knowledge of treating frostbite using traditional remedies. Jewish baker Abraham Goldberg uses the last of his flour to make bread for everyone, regardless of religion or nationality. The most touching scene occurs in Chen Wei's laundry, when his small coal stove becomes the only source of heat for an entire block. Chen opens his doors to anyone seeking warmth, and soon his small shop holds 30 people from 6 different countries. They can barely communicate verbally, but they share body heat, food, and the universal language of human compassion. When Chen's own coal runs dangerously low, the other refugees organize a collection. Everyone contributes something, coins, jewelry, even precious family heirlooms, to purchase more fuel. Mrs. O'Malley gives her wedding ring, saying, "My Patrick would understand. He always said the living need warmth more than the dead need gold." Dr. Davidson, that dedicated physician we met on the first day, finally succumbs to exhaustion during the second night. His horse collapsed hours ago, unable to continue through the drifts, but Davidson continued on foot, carrying his medical bag and using a walking stick to probe for hidden obstacles in the snow. He's answered 17 calls since the storm began, delivering 2 babies, treating countless cases of frostbite, and performing emergency surgery on a man injured when his roof collapsed. Now, stumbling through the financial district, Davidson falls face first into a drift and lacks the strength to rise. Fortunately, Bank President Whitney's building is nearby, and Murphy O'Brien spots the doctor's dark coat against the white snow during one of his supply runs. They carry Davidson to the bank's makeshift infirmary, where Whitney personally tends to the exhausted physician. "You've saved half the city," Whitney tells him, "now let us save you." Davidson recovers after several hours of rest and warmth, but his dedication doesn't waver. Using the bank as a base of operations, he continues treating patients brought to him by Murphy and other volunteers. He operates by lamplight, using Whitney's letter opener sterilized in whiskey to perform emergency procedures. The vault becomes an operating theatre where lives are saved through improvisation and determination. Children throughout the city display remarkable resilience during the second night. 8-year-old Michael O'Connor becomes the messenger for his entire tenement, small enough to crawl through tunnels in the snow that adults cannot navigate. He carries messages between floors, checks on elderly neighbours, and even ventures outside to nearby buildings with news and requests for help. 12-year-old Sarah Goldman organises the children in her building into a snow brigade, teaching them to work together to keep stairways clear and collect ice for drinking water. She assigns the youngest children to tear paper and the older ones to collect combustible materials, turning the job of survival into a game that keeps everyone busy and hopeful. Perhaps most remarkably, 14-year-old Daniel Murphy, another Murphy, the name is common in the Irish neighbourhoods, volunteers to be lowered by rope from his family's third-floor window to check on the elderly woman who lives alone on the first floor. When he discovers that Mrs. Chen, a different Mrs. Chen, has fallen and injured her hip, Daniel organises the other teenagers in the building to create a pulley system using clotheslines and wash baskets to lift her to the warmer upper floors. These young heroes understand instinctively what many adults forget, that survival depends not on individual strength, but on community cooperation. Their creativity and fearlessness often provide solutions that exhausted adults cannot see. When morning finally breaks on March 13th, it brings little relief. The storm has not ended. It still howls with the same ferocity, but in the faint grey light, the scale of its destruction becomes visible. You no longer recognise New York. It's a city reshaped by snow and silence. Streets are no longer streets but vast trenches carved between walls of white. Drifts climb as high as second-story windows, burying doors and trapping families inside their homes. Entire rows of houses appear to vanish, their roofs the only sign of what lies beneath. When you manage to open your door, you step into a world that feels otherworldly. Silence presses in on all sides, broken only by the whistle of wind and the muffled creak of snow shifting beneath its own weight. You move cautiously like an explorer in a strange new land, each step sinking deep into icy powder. As the city awakes to its snowbound reality, the work of survival begins in earnest. You arm yourself with shovels, picks, even cooking pots, carving narrow tunnels through drifts that block your door. Every strike of metal against ice rings hollow in the muffled silence, a rhythm of defiance against the storm. The work is exhausting. For every path cleared, wind sweeps new snow across it, filling the space within minutes. Still, the effort continues because movement means connection. You dig toward neighbours, calling encouragement as you draw closer, cheering when hands finally clasp through the snow. The third day of the blizzard reveals the city's true character. With supplies running critically low and exhaustion setting in, some people retreat into selfishness, while others discover reserves of generosity they never knew they possessed. In the Astor House Hotel, a social experiment unfolds. The wealthy guests, accustomed to being served, find themselves working alongside hotel staff to keep everyone alive. Mrs. Prudence Worthington, a steel magnate's wife, learns to stoke furnaces from Irish bellhop Sean Patrick. "I never knew such work existed," she tells him, her fine dress stained with coal dust. "You've been keeping us warm all these years, and I never even noticed." Meanwhile, hotel kitchen staff like Mary Flanagan find themselves teaching society ladies how to stretch meagre supplies into nutritious meals. Mary shows Mrs. Worthington how to make soup from potato peels and meat bones, how to bake hardtack that will keep for days, how to brew tea from tree bark when regular tea runs out. The hotel's grand ballroom becomes a communal dormitory where millionaires and maids sleep side by side on mattresses dragged down from the rooms above. Social barriers that seemed unbreachable just days ago crumble like the snow walls outside. Children of wealthy guests play with servants' children, sharing toys and stories without regard for their parents' social positions. Hotel manager Pemberton organizes work crews that include both staff and guests. Former US Senator Charles Whitmore finds himself working alongside janitor Giuseppe Rossini to clear snow from the hotel's air vents. The senator, who once gave speeches about the dignity of labor, finally understands what those words actually mean as his soft hands blister from unaccustomed work. The storm also transforms the city's religious institutions into centers of practical salvation. Rabbi Samuel Goldstein opens Temple Beth El not just for worship but as a distribution center for emergency supplies. Working alongside Father O'Malley from St. Patrick's Cathedral and Pastor William Strong from the Methodist Church on Fifth Avenue, they organize interfaith rescue missions. These unlikely partners discover that survival transcends theological differences. Rabbi Goldstein shares the temple's matzo with Christian refugees, while Father O'Malley uses Catholic Church funds to purchase coal for the synagogue's furnaces. Pastor Strong organizes Protestant volunteers to help distribute kosher food to Jewish families, learning about dietary laws in the process. Their most ambitious project involves combining their congregation's resources to establish warming stations throughout the city. Each religious building becomes a beacon of hope, with volunteers taking turns to maintain fires and distribute whatever food and clothing they can gather. The sight of priest, rabbi, and pastor working together becomes a powerful symbol that gives people hope beyond mere physical survival. The storm creates unlikely friendships that will last long after the snow melts. Mrs. Elizabeth Hartwell, wife of the newspaper editor, finds herself sharing a tenement basement with Italian immigrant family the Rossinis. Initially, the language barrier and cultural differences seem insurmountable, but necessity breeds creativity. Mrs. Hartwell teaches young Maria Rossini to read English using pages from books in her purse, while Mrs. Rossini shows her how to make filling meals from scraps most Americans would throw away. They communicate through gestures, drawings, and shared laughter when words fail. By the third day, Mrs. Hartwell is helping to feed the Rossini baby and learning Italian lullabies to sing to the frightened children. When Mr. Rossini's English proves barely adequate to explain that his wife needs medical attention for a developing infection, Mrs. Hartwell doesn't hesitate. She braves the storm to bring Dr. Morrison back to the tenement, using her social connections to ensure the immigrant family receives the same care as any wealthy patient. The friendship between seamstress Mary Kellerman and Dr. Davidson also deepens during the third day. When Davidson's medical supplies run low, Mary uses her sewing skills to help him. She sterilizes her finest needles to serve as surgical instruments and tears her best linen into bandages. Her steady hands and keen eyesight prove invaluable in treating delicate wounds. Mary's knowledge of fabrics helps Davidson improvise medical equipment. She shows him how to weave wool into waterproof wrappings for frostbite treatment and how to use silk thread for internal sutures. In return, Davidson teaches her basic medical techniques that will serve her well in the city's poorest neighborhoods. Their partnership becomes so effective that other survivors begin seeking them out specifically. Word spreads through the snow-blocked streets that the lady doctor and the seamstress can help with anything from childbirth to broken bones. They work as a team, with Mary providing the precise handwork and Davidson supplying the medical knowledge. Thomas Murphy, our Irish dock worker, emerges as a natural leader in his Lower East Side neighborhood. His experience with heavy labor and dangerous working conditions prepares him well for the storm's challenges. He organizes teams of men to dig out critical paths to food sources, medical facilities, and fuel supplies. Murphy's greatest contribution comes when he realizes that many buildings in his area are in danger of collapse under the snow's weight. Using techniques learned from his dock work, he shows other men how to build support structures using whatever materials they can find: broken furniture, fence posts, even doors removed from their hinges. His makeshift engineering saves several buildings from collapse, including the tenement where the O'Brien family lives. When little Catherine O'Brien's home threatens to fall, Murphy organizes a human chain of volunteers who work through the night to reinforce the structure and safely evacuate the residents. Murphy's wife, Margaret, becomes equally important to the neighborhood's survival. She transforms their small apartment into a community kitchen, organizing the women to pool their food supplies and cook communal meals. Her ability to stretch meager ingredients into filling meals keeps dozens of families fed when individual supplies would have run out. Margaret also serves as the neighborhood's unofficial banker, keeping track of who contributes what and ensuring that sharing remains equitable. When some families have nothing left to give, she finds tasks they can perform: watching children, tending fires, or helping with cooking, that allow them to maintain their dignity while receiving help. The storm reveals that survival depends not on individual heroism, but on community networks. The neighborhoods that thrive are those where residents work together, share resources, and look after their most vulnerable members. The areas that suffer most are those where people retreat into isolation, hoarding supplies and refusing to help their neighbors. In Washington Square, wealthy residents initially try to weather the storm in individual mansions, each family for itself. But as supplies run low and heating systems fail, they're forced to pool resources or face disaster. The transformation doesn't come easily. Generations of social conditioning resist the idea of sharing space with servants and tradespeople. The breakthrough comes when elderly Mrs. Vanderbilt, doyen of New York society, collapses from hunger and cold in her mansion. Her servants have fled, her coal is exhausted, and she faces death alone among her priceless possessions. It's her gardener's son, young Patrick Sullivan, who saves her life by breaking into the house and carrying her to the improvised community shelter in the nearby public school. Mrs. Vanderbilt's rescue becomes a turning point for the Washington Square community. If the neighborhood's most prominent resident can accept help from the working class, others can swallow their pride as well. Within hours, the school shelter welcomes dozens of wealthy residents who had been too proud to seek help earlier. The mixing of social classes produces unexpected benefits. The wealthy residents' financial resources combined with the working class residents' practical skills create a more effective survival community than either group could have managed alone. Millionaire Jacob Astor finds himself learning carpentry from contractor Jim O'Brien, while Mrs. Astor discovers she has a talent for nursing when helping tend sick children. By the third night, the storm finally begins to weaken. The wind's howling drops to a steady moan, and the snow, while still falling, no longer comes in blinding sheets. For the first time in 3 days, you can see more than a few feet in front of your face. The psychological effect is immediate and profound. People who had begun to despair that the storm might never end suddenly find new energy for survival. Rescue parties venture further from their shelters, searching for trapped survivors and establishing connections between isolated groups. Communication networks begin to reform. not through restored telegraph lines, but through human messengers brave enough to traverse the dangerous streets. Young men like Michael O'Connor and Daniel Murphy become vital links between neighborhoods, carrying news of survival, death, and desperate need from one community to another. These messenger networks reveal the storm's full scope of devastation. Entire districts remain cut off, their residents' fates unknown. Some buildings have collapsed completely under the snow's weight, while others stand empty, their occupants either evacuated or lost. The messenger boys become heroes, risking their lives to maintain the human connections that keep hope alive. For many who set out on ordinary errands before the storm closed its grip, the city has become a vast, frozen prison. You might be among train passengers still sitting stranded in darkened cars, breath clouding the air, lanterns dimming as fuel runs low. The elevated train system, once the proud symbol of New York's modernity, has become a network of frozen traps. Trains sit motionless on elevated tracks, their windows frosted over, their wheels locked in ice. Inside these metal shells, hundreds of passengers endure an ordeal that tests human endurance to its limits. On the 2nd Avenue L, train number 23 carries 68 passengers, who boarded for what should have been a 20-minute journey to the Bronx. They've now been trapped for over 60 hours, and their situation grows more desperate with each passing hour. The train's heating system failed on the first night, and passengers must rely on shared body heat and whatever combustible materials they can find. Conductor James O'Sullivan has emerged as the unofficial leader of this trapped community. A veteran railwayman with 20 years of experience, he knows the system better than anyone aboard. He's organized the passengers into work groups. Some tend the makeshift fires, others ration the limited food supplies, and the strongest take turns chopping ice to provide drinking water. Among his charges is Mrs. Catherine Brennan, travelling with her 3 young children to visit relatives in the Bronx. Her youngest, baby Patrick, just 6 months old, requires constant attention to keep warm. The other passengers have rallied around the family, with businessman Frederick Whitman donating his expensive wool coat to wrap the infant, and elderly Mrs. Cohen sharing her knitting needles so other women can unravel clothing to create additional blankets. The train's most valuable passenger proves to be Dr. Samuel Klein, a young physician returning from a medical conference. He's taken charge of treating the growing number of frostbite cases and monitoring passengers for signs of hypothermia. Using his medical bag's limited supplies and improvised tools, he's performed minor surgery on several passengers, including removing frostbitten toes from Mr. Giuseppe Romano, an Italian labourer who insisted on working outside the train to clear ice from the doors. The train's teenage passengers have formed their own survival unit. 16-year-old Michael Sullivan organises the boys to venture outside onto the elevated platform, despite the extreme danger, to gather coal that has spilled from freight cars. These dangerous expeditions provide fuel for their fires, but young Timothy Walsh nearly falls to his death when ice gives way beneath his feet. Only Michael's quick reflexes save him, grabbing the boy's hand as he dangles 30 feet above the street. The girls, led by 18-year-old Sarah McCarthy, focus on maintaining morale and caring for the younger children. Sarah organizes singing sessions, storytelling circles, and even dancing, anything to keep people moving and spirits up. She teaches the Italian children English songs while learning Italian lullabies from Mrs. Romano, creating a multicultural harmony that transcends the crisis. Food becomes a constant concern as the days drag on. Passengers initially hoarded their individual supplies, but Conductor O'Sullivan convinces them that survival depends on sharing. They establish a communal kitchen in the centre car, where Mrs. O'Brien, a cook by profession, transforms meagre ingredients into filling meals. She makes soup from boot leather, stew from newspaper, boiled to remove ink, and teaches everyone to chew slowly to maximize nutrition from minimal food. The psychological challenges prove as difficult as the physical ones. Passengers struggle with claustrophobia, depression, and growing desperation. Mr. William Henderson, a bank clerk, suffers what Dr. Klein recognizes as a nervous breakdown, ranting about missed appointments and ruined career prospects. The other passengers rally to support him, with Father Murphy, a priest travelling to perform a wedding, offering spiritual counselling while businessman Whitman shares stories of overcoming professional setbacks. The train's most inspiring figure emerges in Mrs. Elena Rossetti, a seamstress who speaks broken English but communicates through acts of endless generosity. She dismantles her own clothing to create warm garments for children, uses her sewing skills to repair torn coats and blankets, and somehow maintains an optimistic spirit that lifts everyone around her. When words fail, she communicates through gentle touches, shared smiles, and an intuitive understanding of what each passenger needs. As supplies dwindle, Conductor O'Sullivan makes increasingly difficult decisions. He rations food strictly, sometimes denying his own share to ensure pregnant Mrs. O'Malley receives adequate nutrition. He organizes work details to clear snow from the train's exterior, hoping to make rescue easier when help finally arrives. Most courageously, he ventures onto the elevated tracks during brief lulls in the storm to signal other stranded trains and coordinate survival efforts across the entire system. The train passengers develop their own governance system, with elected representatives from each car forming a council that makes collective decisions about resource allocation, work assignments, and discipline. When passenger Jacob Miller attempts to steal food from the communal supplies, the council votes to confine him to the last car while still ensuring he receives his fair share of rations. This approach maintains order without resorting to violence, demonstrating how democratic principles can emerge even in desperate circumstances. Hotels fill quickly, lobbies crowded with weary strangers who have nowhere else to go. Mattresses are dragged into hallways, blankets stretched across armchairs, and strangers become reluctant companions bound together by the same fate. The hotel experience varies dramatically depending on management philosophy and guest cooperation. At the Grand Central Hotel, manager Charles Davidson implements a strict rationing system and assigns specific duties to both staff and guests. Wealthy patrons initially resist being asked to help with cooking and cleaning, but hunger and cold quickly overcome social pretensions. Mrs. Prudence Astor, accustomed to having a dozen servants, finds herself sharing dishwashing duties with Irish maid Bridget Kelly. Their initial awkwardness gives way to surprising friendship as they discover common interests beyond their social positions. Mrs. Astor's education proves valuable when she helps Bridget write letters to her family in Ireland, while Bridget teaches Mrs. Astor practical skills like mending clothes and preparing simple meals. The hotel's dining room becomes a social laboratory where class distinctions blur under survival pressures. Steel magnate Andrew Morrison finds himself deep in conversation with dock worker Patrick O'Brien about labour conditions and workers' rights. Morrison, who had previously viewed workers as abstract economic units, gains new understanding of their struggles as he witnesses O'Brien's intelligence, dignity, and concern for his family. Perhaps most remarkably, Morrison begins questioning his own business practices. "I've made millions from men like Patrick," he confides to his wife, "but I never bothered to learn their names or understand their lives. How many Patrick O'Briens have I exploited without ever seeing them as human beings?" This conversation, overheard by other guests, sparks broader discussions about social responsibility and economic justice that continue long after the storm ends. The hotel's children, from both wealthy and working-class families, adapt most quickly to their unusual circumstances. They create elaborate games that incorporate their new environment, turning snow clearing into contests and food distribution into theatrical performances. 8-year-old Elizabeth Whitman, daughter of a railroad baron, becomes best friends with 9-year-old Maria Santos, whose father works in the hotel's kitchen. Their friendship, conducted in a mixture of English and Spanish, bridges cultural gaps that their parents are only beginning to recognize. The hotel staff, particularly those from immigrant backgrounds, find themselves in unprecedented positions of authority and respect. Head chef Giuseppe Marconi, usually invisible to wealthy guests, becomes a celebrated figure as he transforms limited supplies into satisfying meals. His knowledge of Italian cooking techniques allows him to create filling dishes from ingredients that others would consider inedible. Night clerk Chen Wei, normally ignored by guests who barely acknowledge his existence, emerges as a crucial figure in the hotel's survival. His knowledge of the building's systems, accumulated through years of quiet observation, enables him to optimize heating efficiency and identify potential safety hazards. Guests who previously treated him as furniture now seek his advice and express genuine gratitude for his contributions. The hotel experience also reveals profound spiritual dimensions of survival. The building's chapel, intended primarily for decorative purposes, becomes a center of genuine religious activity. Rabbi Samuel Goldstein, trapped while visiting Christian friends, joins with Protestant minister Charles Strong and Catholic priest Michael O'Brien to conduct interfaith services that comfort people from all backgrounds. These religious leaders discover that extreme circumstances strip away theological differences, leaving essential spiritual truths that transcend denominational boundaries. Their joint services feature prayers from multiple traditions, creating a new form of worship that speaks to universal human needs rather than specific doctrinal requirements. Guests who rarely attended religious services find themselves deeply moved by these collaborative expressions of faith and hope. Perhaps hardest of all are those separated from families. Fathers who left Brooklyn for work in Manhattan find themselves trapped on the wrong side of the frozen river, unable to return home. Children wait anxiously at windows for parents who never appear through the white curtain of snow. The psychological torment of family separation proves as devastating as any physical hardship endured during the storm. Without telephone service or working telegraph lines, people have no way to communicate with loved ones or even confirm their safety. Imagination fills the void with worst-case scenarios, and anxiety builds with each passing hour. Mary O'Sullivan exemplifies this anguish. She had accompanied her husband Patrick to Manhattan on business, leaving their 4 children with her sister in Brooklyn. When the storm intensified, Patrick insisted they seek shelter rather than attempt the dangerous ferry crossing. Now Mary spends sleepless nights wondering whether her children are warm, fed, and safe. She stands at windows for hours, staring across the ice-choked East River, imagining she can see her neighborhood through the swirling snow. Patrick tries to comfort his wife, but he suffers his own torments. As the family's primary breadwinner, he feels responsible for their survival and haunted by the possibility that his business trip might have left his children orphaned. He organizes rescue missions across the frozen river, not just to help others, but hoping to find news of his own family. His desperate energy inspires other separated fathers to join these dangerous expeditions. On the Brooklyn side, similar dramas unfold in reverse. Mrs. Catherine O'Sullivan tends her 4 nieces and nephews while wondering about her sister Mary's fate in Manhattan. The children ask constantly when their parents will return, and Catherine struggles to maintain hope while preparing for the possibility that she might become their permanent guardian. She tells them stories about brave parents fighting through storms to reach their families, transforming their fear into anticipation. The separation anxiety affects children most severely. 8-year-old Michael O'Sullivan creates elaborate fantasies about his parents' adventures, imagining them as heroes battling snow monsters to reach home. His younger sister Emma, only 5, simply sits by the window repeating Mama coming," like a prayer. Catherine finds that keeping the children busy with survival tasks helps distract them from their fears, so she assigns them important jobs like tending fires and preparing meals. Among the most heartbreaking cases are the unaccompanied children whose parents sent them ahead to relatives' homes just before the storm hit. 10-year-old Timothy Murphy was travelling alone to stay with his grandmother in the Bronx when the train stopped running. Now he's stranded at Grand Central Station with hundreds of other refugees, a small boy lost in an adult disaster. Station Master Harold Fitzpatrick takes personal responsibility for these separated children, creating an informal orphanage in the awaiting rooms and assigning adult volunteers to care for each child. The elderly suffer particularly from family separation anxiety. Mrs. Agnes O'Brien, 82 years old and nearly blind, lives alone in a tenement apartment where her grandson visits daily to bring food and tend her fire. When the storm prevents his visits, she faces not only physical danger but crushing loneliness. She doesn't know that young Patrick O'Brien is trapped 3 blocks away, desperately trying to dig through snowdrifts to reach her building. The storm creates thousands of such personal tragedies, each one a universe of fear and hope invisible to outside observers. Rescue workers begin to understand that their mission involves more than saving lives. They must also repair the human connections that the storm has severed. They carry messages between separated family members, organize reunion efforts, and provide emotional support that proves as vital as physical rescue. By the second day of the blizzard, you realize the city streets no longer resemble streets at all. They've transformed into deep, winding corridors of snow, silent and strange. The usual clatter of hooves, creak of wagon wheels, ringing calls of vendors, all of it is gone. To walk these streets is to step into another world. Lantern light glows faintly from windows above, casting golden halos into white darkness, while below figures trudge slowly, heads bowed, bundled in scarves and shawls. As the storm wears on, the true enemy is no longer the snow but the cold itself. It creeps into every corner of the city, seeping through shutters, stealing into bedrooms, gnawing at the bones of all who endure. Inside homes, frost forms intricate patterns on window panes, delicate as lace, yet merciless in meaning. Your breath lingers in the air, visible even indoors, and water in basins freezes solid overnight. Families huddle close to stoves, feeding them scraps of coal, wood, or anything that might burn. At night, beds become fortresses of blankets and quilts. In the heart of the blizzard, telegraph wires, the veins of communication, have snapped and fallen. With them goes the city's connection to the outside world. Messages can no longer flow between New York and Boston, Philadelphia or Washington. For the first time in years, the great metropolis stands isolated. While many seek refuge in warm homes, hundreds of your fellow New Yorkers have no place to shelter from the storm. The city's poor and homeless are forced to confront the blizzard in its full, merciless force. Snow piles over benches, doorways and alleyways, erasing familiar places where one might usually find rest. When night falls again, the city transforms into a strange, dreamlike landscape. Gas lamps half buried in snow burn faintly through their glass, casting only small pools of light in the vast white darkness. So the people of New York turn to their lanterns. Every home that still has oil lights one, setting it in a window so its glow might pierce the storm. Flickering flames dot the city like constellations, guiding lost travellers and giving comfort to those trapped within. By the storm's third day, the sheer weight of snow becomes a danger of its own. Roofs sag under the crushing burden, beams groaning in protest with each new drift that settles upon them. You might climb up with shovels, risking icy wind to scrape away what you can. Even as the blizzard reaches its fiercest, the human spirit remains alive in small, quiet acts of kindness. Neighbours share what little they have: extra coal, a loaf of bread, a cup of hot tea. In narrow alleyways, strangers offer hands to help each other climb over drifts that block doorways or paths. Amid the relentless snow and ice, the city's gas lines begin to falter. Frost clings to pipes, valves freeze, and in some neighbourhoods, the flow of gas slows to a mere trickle or stops entirely. Homes that rely on gas for cooking and lighting face dim, uncertain nights. By now, wind has become a constant presence, a living entity that sweeps through the city with eerie precision. It howls through streets, rattles shutters, and bends lampposts, carrying snow in twisting, blinding sheets that seem determined to erase every trace of human life. As snow piles higher, some residents begin carving makeshift tunnels through the drifts. These narrow passageways connect homes to neighbours, shops, and essential supply points, creating hidden corridors in an otherwise impassable city. The tunnel system that emerges during the third day becomes a marvel of improvised engineering. Led by men like Thomas Murphy with his dock-working experience, neighbourhoods organise systematic excavation projects. They dig not random paths, but planned networks that connect the most essential locations: medical facilities, food sources, shelters for the homeless. The tunnel builders develop sophisticated techniques. They learn to pack snow walls to prevent collapse, to angle passages to avoid wind exposure, and to create wider chambers where people can rest during longer journeys. Murphy shows others how to use wooden boards salvaged from fences and broken furniture to shore up tunnel walls. The most ingenious innovation comes from watchmaker Heinrich Zimmermann, a German immigrant whose precision with tiny mechanisms translates perfectly to tunnel engineering. He designs a system of mirrors and candles that can carry light through the tunnels, allowing navigation even in complete darkness. His wife Martha contributes by weaving rope from cloth strips, creating guidelines that prevent people from getting lost in the maze of passages. The tunnel network becomes so sophisticated that it develops its own culture and customs. Tunnel workers establish rest stations every 50 yards, equipped with emergency supplies of water, hardtack, and blankets. They create a system of coded knocks that communicate conditions ahead. 2 taps means safe passage, 3 taps warn of dangerous conditions, and 4 rapid taps signal medical emergency. Dr. Davidson begins using the tunnels for house calls, carrying his medical bag through passages that would be impossible to navigate on the surface. He establishes underground first aid stations in the wider chambers, stocking them with basic supplies and training tunnel workers in emergency medicine. Sarah Goldman, that remarkable 12-year-old organizer, becomes his chief assistant, her small hands perfect for treating children's injuries in confined spaces. The tunnel system also serves unexpected social functions. In chambers beneath the streets, people from different neighborhoods meet and share news, creating bonds that transcend the ethnic and economic divisions that normally separate them. Irish dock workers collaborate with Jewish tailors, Italian bakers work alongside Chinese laundrymen, and Protestant ministers find themselves planning relief efforts with Catholic priests. Children become the tunnel system's primary users, their small size allowing them to navigate passages that would challenge adults. They form organized courier services, carrying messages, medicine, and small supplies between isolated households. 10-year-old Anna Petrov becomes famous throughout the Lower East Side for her ability to navigate the tunnel network blindfolded, delivering crucial medicine to sick children in buildings that rescuers cannot reach by surface routes. Anna's most heroic mission comes when she learns that Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly Spanish woman, has been trapped alone in her basement apartment for 2 days without food or heat. The building's entrance is completely buried, and surface rescue is impossible. Anna volunteers to carry food and medicine through a particularly dangerous section of tunnel that requires crawling through spaces barely 18 inches high. The journey takes her over an hour, squirming through passages where adults would become hopelessly stuck. She emerges in Mrs. Rodriguez's basement like an angel, her face blackened with soot but carrying precious supplies in a satchel strapped to her back. Mrs. Rodriguez, who speaks little English, weeps with gratitude and teaches Anna Spanish prayers that the girl will remember for the rest of her life. Young Daniel Murphy, Thomas's nephew, proves equally brave in the tunnel system. At 15, he's larger than the younger children but still agile enough to navigate difficult passages. He specializes in rescue missions, leading teams of teenagers to extract people trapped in collapsed buildings or dangerous situations. Daniel's most challenging rescue involves a family of 5 trapped in a basement when their building's heating system failed completely. The father, Mr. Kowalski, had been trying to repair a broken furnace when he was overcome by coal gas fumes. His wife and 3 children were too weak from cold to carry him to safety, and surface rescue teams couldn't reach them through the blocked entrance. Daniel organizes a rescue team of 6 teenagers, including Anna Petrov and Michael O'Connor. They spend 4 hours digging a rescue tunnel that connects to the Kowalski basement, then work in shifts to carry the unconscious father through passages designed for children. The rescue requires building a makeshift stretcher that can be pulled through the tunnels, and every boy and girl takes turns hauling the heavy load through the underground maze. When they finally emerge with Mr. Kowalski at Dr. Davidson's underground clinic, the man is barely alive, his lips blue from cold and gas poisoning. But Davidson's quick treatment saves his life, and the family reunion that follows becomes legendary in tunnel folklore. Mrs. Kowalski kisses each of the young rescuers, calling them her guardian angels, while her children pledge to become tunnel workers themselves when they're old enough. The tunnel system also becomes an underground economy where people trade goods and services. Mrs. Chen, the Chinese herbalist's wife, sets up an underground pharmacy in one of the larger chambers, trading traditional medicines for food and fuel. Her remedies, particularly her ginger tea for frostbite and her herbal compresses for respiratory problems, become highly sought after throughout the tunnel network. Baker Abraham Goldberg establishes an underground bakery using a portable oven constructed from metal scraps and clay. He bakes bread in small batches, trading loaves for medical supplies, warm clothing, and tunnel maintenance work. The smell of fresh bread wafting through the passages becomes a powerful morale booster, reminding people that normal life still exists somewhere beneath the storm. The tunnel network's most remarkable feature is its communication system. Tunnel workers develop a method of message relay that allows news to travel from one end of the Lower East Side to the other in less than an hour. Children stationed at regular intervals memorize messages and pass them along, creating a human telegraph system that operates entirely underground. This network proves crucial when Dr. Morrison, the female physician, needs specific medical supplies to treat a difficult childbirth. Her request travels through the tunnels to Hermann Schultz, a German pharmacist who has been hoarding medical supplies in his basement. Within 2 hours, the needed medicines travel back through the tunnel system, saving both mother and child. The psychological impact of the tunnel system cannot be overstated. In a city where the surface world has become impassable and dangerous, the underground passages represent hope, connection, and human ingenuity. People no longer feel completely isolated. They know that help can reach them through these hidden arteries beneath the snow. Children especially benefit from the tunnel culture. Instead of cowering in fear during the storm, they have important jobs to do, missions that make them feel heroic rather than helpless. Parents watch with amazement as their sons and daughters transform from frightened victims into confident tunnel navigators, capable of feats that would have seemed impossible before the storm. The tunnel system also preserves cultural traditions that might otherwise be lost during the crisis. In underground chambers, Irish storytellers continue their oral traditions. Jewish families conduct abbreviated Sabbath services. Italian families sing folk songs, and Chinese elders teach calligraphy to children using charcoal on wooden boards. Music becomes particularly important in the tunnels. Sound travels well through the passages, and musicians discover they can perform for audiences scattered throughout the network. Violin melodies drift through tunnels, carrying messages of beauty and hope to people huddled in dark chambers. Children learn to sing together across distances, their voices creating an underground chorus that lifts spirits even in the darkest hours. As the storm continues into its 4th day, the tunnel system becomes so well developed that it begins to influence the surface world's recovery efforts. When rescue teams finally begin reaching some areas, they discover that the underground networks have already established supply lines, medical facilities, and communication systems that are more effective than anything the authorities could have organized from above. The tunnel builders have created something more than emergency passages. They've built a shadow city beneath the snow, complete with its own government, economy, and culture. Leaders like Thomas Murphy and Heinrich Zimmermann find themselves managing complex logistics, while children like Anna Petrov and Daniel Murphy become legendary figures whose exploits are recounted around underground fires. When historians later write about the Great Blizzard of 1888, they will spend considerable time analysing this underground society. The tunnel system represents something unprecedented in urban disaster response. A completely improvised infrastructure created by ordinary citizens working together, without official coordination or government support. It demonstrates that in times of crisis, human ingenuity and cooperation can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The legacy of the tunnel builders extends far beyond the storm itself. Heinrich Zimmermann's engineering techniques will be studied by civil engineers designing subway systems. The communication networks developed by children like Anna Petrov will influence emergency response protocols for decades. Most importantly, the social bonds forged in underground chambers will reshape New York's neighborhoods, breaking down barriers between ethnic groups and creating lasting friendships across class lines. As the fourth day dawns and the storm finally begins to weaken, you witness the gradual emergence of a transformed city. The snow stops falling in driving sheets and settles into gentle flakes that drift lazily earthward. For the first time in days, you can see more than a few yards ahead, and the sight that greets you defies comprehension. New York has become a city of snow canyons and ice palaces. Drifts rise to second-story windows, creating vast corridors between buildings. The familiar grid of streets has vanished, replaced by a landscape that seems more arctic than urban. Steam rises from the few chimneys still functioning, creating ghostly columns in the cold air. The silence is profound and unsettling. Gone is the constant urban symphony of hooves, wheels, voices, and machinery. In its place lies a hushed stillness, broken only by the occasional crack of ice settling or the distant sound of rescue workers calling to one another. You realize you're witnessing something no New Yorker has ever seen before, their city at complete rest. The work of recovery begins immediately, even as the storm continues to weaken. Teams of volunteers emerge from shelters, armed with shovels, picks, and determination. They begin the mammoth task of digging out the city, one door at a time, one street at a time. The work is back-breaking and slow, but it's driven by urgent necessity. People are still trapped, supplies are running dangerously low, and medical emergencies require immediate attention. The city's recovery reveals the full scope of both devastation and heroism. Buildings have collapsed under snow loads, but neighbors have risked their lives to save strangers. Transportation systems have failed completely, but human networks have emerged to take their place. Government services have proven inadequate, but citizen organizations have filled the gap with remarkable effectiveness. As you help with the digging, you understand that you've witnessed something extraordinary, not just a natural disaster, but a profound demonstration of human resilience and community spirit. The Great Blizzard of 1888 has tested New York to its limits and revealed the true character of its people. In the face of nature's awesome power, ordinary citizens became heroes, strangers became family, and a great city proved it could endure anything. The storm may have buried New York in snow, but it could not bury the indomitable spirit of its people. As the tunnels connect, the trains resume, and normal life slowly returns, the lessons of those 4 days will remain forever etched in the city's memory, a testament to what humans can accomplish when they stand together against the storm. The tunnels also serve as hiding places for those fleeing domestic violence or other dangers that don't pause for blizzards. Mrs. Catherine Walsh uses the tunnel network to escape her violent husband, taking her 3 young children through underground passages to reach the safety of Mother Mary Catherine's mission house. The nuns welcome her through a concealed tunnel entrance, and she finds sanctuary not just from the storm, but from the human tempest that made her home unsafe. Dr. Davidson uses the tunnel system to extend his medical practice throughout the storm's duration. He establishes a network of tunnel stations, small chambers where he can store medical supplies and treat patients. His most successful station operates in the basement of Chen Wei's laundry, where the Chinese herbalist's knowledge combines with Davidson's Western medicine, To create effective treatments for frostbite and exposure, the laundry station becomes a model for cross-cultural cooperation. Mr. Chen teaches Davidson about traditional remedies that work better than some Western treatments: ginger tea for circulation, herbal poultices for frostbite, breathing exercises to maintain warmth. Davidson shares his knowledge of anatomy and surgical techniques, helping Chen understand why his traditional remedies work so effectively. Their partnership saves dozens of lives during the storm's worst days. When young Peter Kowalski falls through thin ice covering a basement window well, Chen's herbs prevent infection, while Davidson's surgery repairs the damage. When elderly Mrs. Brennan develops pneumonia from the cold, Davidson's medicines reduce her fever while Chen's breathing techniques help her lungs heal. The tunnel network reveals the storm's true geography, not the street map that city planners drew, but the pathways that desperate people actually use to survive. The most important tunnels don't follow city blocks, but connect human hearts. The path from Anna Kowalski's building to the orphanage where she delivers food to hungry children, the route from Rabbi Goldstein's synagogue to Father O'Malley's cathedral, where they coordinate interfaith relief efforts. These underground passages become arteries of compassion, carrying not just supplies but hope through the city's frozen body. When word spreads through the tunnel network that baby Hope Santos has been born in Dr. Morrison's clinic, the news travels faster than any telegraph could carry it. Strangers celebrate the birth of a child they've never seen, because new life represents victory over the storm's death-dealing power. The tunnel builders also become the storm's chroniclers. They carry stories from neighborhood to neighborhood, tales of heroism, tragedy, and survival that bind the city together even when surface travel is impossible. Through the tunnel network, people learn about Murphy O'Brien's frostbitten sacrifice to save a trapped family, about Mrs. Vanderbilt's rescue by her gardener's son, about the children who organize snow brigades to help their communities survive. These stories become the foundation of the city's collective memory of the storm. Long after the snow melts, New Yorkers will remember not just the blizzard's fury, but the human responses it inspired. The tunnel network preserves these memories, carrying them from person to person like precious cargo that must be protected and shared. On the storm's third night, the tunnel system faces its greatest test, when a section near the 5 Points district begins to collapse. Heavy snow and poor construction threaten to bury several families who were using the passage to reach food supplies. Thomas Murphy leads a dangerous rescue mission, crawling through unstable tunnels to reach the trapped families, while Anna Kowalski organizes surface teams to dig down from above. The rescue takes 6 hours of coordinated effort. Murphy and 2 other men work in shifts, digging by hand to avoid causing further collapse, while the surface teams carefully remove snow to reduce pressure on the tunnel walls. They save all 7 trapped people, including 2 small children who had lost consciousness from cold and oxygen deprivation. The near disaster leads to improved tunnel construction techniques. Murphy establishes safety protocols: no tunnel longer than 50 feet without a surface access point, mandatory wooden supports for all passages through loose snow, and buddy systems for anyone traveling underground. These innovations spread throughout the tunnel network, making the entire system safer and more reliable. By the third day, the tunnel network has become so extensive that it effectively creates an underground city beneath the snow-covered streets. Maps drawn on scraps of paper help people navigate the passages, and rest stations provide places to warm up during longer journeys. The tunnels develop their own culture, with unwritten rules about sharing space, helping other travelers, and maintaining the passages for future use. The underground network also demonstrates the storm's democratic effects. Social barriers that seem insurmountable above ground dissolve in the intimate confines of the tunnels. Mrs. Whitman, the banker's wife, finds herself crawling through mud alongside Irish dock workers and Italian immigrants, all of them equally desperate for survival. The tunnels don't recognize social class, only human need. When the storm finally begins to weaken, the tunnel network becomes the foundation for the city's recovery. The passages that carried emergency supplies during the crisis become conduits for rebuilding efforts. Workers use the tunnels to move construction materials, volunteers use them to coordinate relief efforts, and neighbours use them to check on each other's well-being. The tunnel system's success inspires permanent changes in the city's infrastructure. Engineers study the improvised passages to understand how underground networks might help the city survive future disasters. The experience leads to improved subway planning and the development of emergency tunnel systems that will serve the city for decades to come. Most importantly, the tunnel network proves that survival depends not on individual strength, but on community connections. The passages work because people work together to build, maintain, and use them safely. They succeed because tunnel users understand that helping others isn't just morally right, it's practically necessary for everyone's survival. In the years that follow the storm, many of the emergency tunnels are filled in and forgotten, but their lessons remain. New Yorkers who survived the blizzard remember that the city's true strength lies not in its buildings or technology, but in the human networks that connect neighbor to neighbor, heart to heart, need to helping hand. The riverfronts along the eastern Hudson rivers are now scenes of stark, icy desolation. Ferries lie immobilized, hulls coated with frost, decks buried beneath layers of snow. Ice pushes outward from the shore, forming jagged, slippery shelves that glisten in pale daylight. For the city's poorest residents, the blizzard poses particular danger. Tenements already cramped and drafty are ill-equipped to withstand the relentless cold. Roofs sag under snow, chimneys struggle to carry smoke, and thin walls allow frost to creep in. The city's markets, usually bustling centres of trade and chatter, have become ghostly landscapes. Stalls are buried under snow, their wares hidden beneath white blankets that sparkle faintly in dim light. Vendors who brave the storm work with relentless determination. Nightfall during the blizzard is particularly haunting. Darkness envelops you, and falling snow seems to absorb every sound, leaving only the whisper of wind and the occasional groan of ice-laden structures. Firefighters face a unique and dangerous challenge during the blizzard. Snow blocks streets, slows horses, and buries fire hydrants under drifts, making even a short response to emergencies a monumental task. Yet fires still break out. Streetcars, once lifelines weaving through the city, are now trapped beneath layers of snow and ice. Tracks disappear under towering drifts, wheels jam against frozen rails, and the trolleys themselves groan under the strain of ice accumulation. Among avenues and in parks, trees are transformed into frozen sculptures. Branches droop under the weight of snow and ice, bending so low that you have to duck or carefully push past. Icicles hang like glass chandeliers, glittering faintly when lanterns or weak sunlight catch them. As the blizzard enters its 5th day, frostbite becomes an ever-present danger. Exposed skin freezes quickly, and even brief ventures outside can leave fingers, toes, and cheeks painfully numb or permanently damaged. With the storm showing no sign of abating, some neighborhoods organize night watches. Groups of residents take turns patrolling streets, checking on neighbours, reinforcing snow-cleared paths, and keeping lanterns lit to guide travellers. Water, once a simple necessity, becomes a daily challenge. Wells freeze, their surfaces capped with thick ice, forcing you to chip through or melt snow to obtain drinking water. In tenements, buckets are filled carefully, and rationing becomes essential. For brief, fleeting moments, the blizzard eases just enough to create an eerie silence. Wind pauses, snow falls lightly or stops entirely, and the city seems suspended, frozen in time. Streets are white rivers, rooftops glitter under pale light. By the fifth night, coal, a lifeline for warmth, has become scarce. Many families, already rationing fuel, now face the reality that their stoves might not last through the night. You measure each piece carefully, feeding fires sparingly to preserve heat, while still warding off creeping cold. As dusk falls, the city's frozen shops take on a ghostly glow. Gas lamps flicker weakly through frosted windows, casting long shadows across snow-covered streets. Inside, only a few stubborn vendors remain, tending to the last of their goods. Churches become sanctuaries during the blizzard, both physically and spiritually. With streets blocked and homes cold, many residents turn to these buildings for warmth, prayer, and community. Candles flicker in stained glass windows, casting colourful patterns across pews and walls. Carriages, once the arteries of the city, are now immobilised by snowdrifts and ice. Horses struggle against towering walls of white, their breath visible in thick clouds as drivers urge them forward. As evening settles over New York, tenements hum with quiet activity. Families gather around small stoves, sharing whatever warmth they can generate. The aroma of thin soups and baked bread mingles with the sharp scent of coal smoke. At last, after days of relentless snow and wind, a faint light signals the coming of dawn. The blizzard has eased, leaving a city transformed. Streets are buried beneath mountains of white, roofs glisten with ice, and every tree and fence is outlined in frost. You emerge cautiously from your home, eyes wide at the changed landscape. Children run into the streets, testing drifts, laughing as their boots sink into soft snow. Adults survey the damage, collapsed roofs, broken branches, buried pathways. Yet relief mingles with exhaustion. After the storm has finally spent its fury, a profound quiet settles over New York City. The relentless wind has calmed, leaving only the soft whisper of snow shifting in morning light. Streets, sidewalks, and alleyways are buried beneath deep drifts, transforming familiar neighborhoods into an entirely new world. You emerge slowly, moving carefully over packed snow. Every step creates a small crunch beneath boots, echoing in the stillness. People help one another, clearing entrances, digging out pathways, rescuing horses, wagons, and carriages trapped beneath the weight of ice and snow. The recovery begins with small acts of reconnection. Thomas Murphy, that determined dock worker, organizes teams to dig tunnels between buildings, creating a network of passages that allow his neighborhood to function as a community. His engineering experience proves invaluable as he directs the construction of snow walls that channel wind away from the most vulnerable structures. Margaret Murphy becomes the neighborhood's coordinator of aid, working with seamstress Mary Kellerman to organize clothing drives for those who lost everything to the storm. They establish a distribution center in the Murphys' small apartment, where people can come to receive warm clothing, hot meals, and simply human companionship after days of isolation. Dr. Davidson, though exhausted from his heroic efforts during the storm, continues his rounds with renewed energy, now that travel is becoming possible again. He works with Dr. Morrison to establish medical stations throughout the city, treating the countless cases of frostbite, exposure, and injuries that resulted from the blizzard. The two doctors discover that their different backgrounds, Davidson's experience with the city's working poor and Morrison's training in modern surgical techniques, complement each other perfectly. They begin planning a permanent partnership that will serve all of New York's residents regardless of their ability to pay. Little Catherine O'Brien, that brave 7-year-old who swept Mrs. Miller's steps, becomes something of a neighborhood celebrity. Her story of kindness repaid with kindness inspires others to perform small acts of generosity. Mrs. Miller, grateful for Catherine's help before the storm, establishes a fund to provide free bread for families in need. Catherine herself becomes the fund's first volunteer, helping to distribute loaves to hungry children. The storm's aftermath reveals lasting changes in New York's social fabric. At the Astor House Hotel, the wealthy guests who worked alongside staff during the crisis don't simply return to their old ways. Mrs. Worthington, the steel magnate's wife, establishes a foundation to provide better working conditions and wages for hotel employees. She hires Sean Patrick, the Irish bellhop who taught her to stoke furnaces, as her personal advisor on labour relations. Hotel manager Pemberton implements permanent changes in hotel operations, creating employee recreation areas and improving living quarters for staff. The experience of shared struggle has convinced him that treating employees well isn't just moral, it's practical. Workers who feel valued perform better and remain loyal during crises. The interfaith cooperation that emerged during the storm continues in the weeks that follow. Rabbi Goldstein, Father O'Malley, and Pastor Strong established the Interfaith Emergency Council, a permanent organization designed to coordinate religious communities' responses to future disasters. Their success during the blizzard proves that cooperation across religious lines benefits everyone. Their first major project involves establishing soup kitchens in each house of worship, ensuring that no one in their neighborhoods goes hungry during the difficult weeks of recovery. They also create employment programs, using their congregation's connections to help storm victims find work to replace lost income. Bank President Whitney makes his cooperation with his employees during the storm a model for ongoing labor relations. He establishes an employee council that gives workers a voice in bank operations and creates an emergency fund to help employees facing personal crises. His driver, Murphy O'Brien, despite losing 2 fingers to frostbite, becomes Whitney's chief of security and his most trusted advisor on practical matters. The storm reveals that New York's strength lies not in its impressive buildings or advanced technology, but in its people's capacity for cooperation and mutual aid. Neighborhoods that survived best were those where residents looked out for each other, shared resources, and worked together to solve problems. This lesson reshapes how the city approaches urban planning and emergency preparedness. City officials, humbled by their inability to respond effectively to the crisis, begin consulting with community leaders like Thomas Murphy and Anna Kowalski about how to better serve working-class neighborhoods. The telegraph companies, learning from their complete failure during the storm, begin burying lines underground and establishing backup communication systems. The experience of isolation teaches everyone that communication isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for urban survival. Fire departments reorganized their operations, establishing neighborhood fire stations with equipment designed for winter emergencies. Police departments create specialized rescue units trained in snow and ice operations. Hospitals stock emergency supplies and establish protocols for treating large numbers of storm victims. Most importantly, the city's residents carry forward the lessons of cooperation they learned during the blizzard. Neighborhood organizations that formed during the storm continue to meet regularly, planning for future emergencies and addressing ongoing community needs. The social barriers that seemed so important before the storm never fully rebuild. Mrs. Hartwell, the newspaper editor's wife, maintains her friendship with the Rossini family long after the emergency passes. She helps them learn English and navigate American bureaucracy, while they teach her children Italian and share their rich cultural traditions. Their friendship becomes a model for cross-cultural understanding in an increasingly diverse city. Mary Kellerman's partnership with Dr. Davidson evolves into a formal training program where she teaches basic medical skills to other working-class women. Their success demonstrates that healthcare doesn't require expensive formal education. It requires caring, attention to detail, and willingness to learn. Their program eventually becomes a model for community health initiatives throughout the city. The children who showed such courage during the storm grow up with a different understanding of citizenship and community responsibility. Michael O'Connor, the 8-year-old messenger, becomes a social worker dedicated to helping immigrant families adapt to American life. Sarah Goldman, who organized the Children's Snow Brigade, becomes a teacher who emphasizes cooperation and problem-solving in her classroom. Daniel Murphy, the teenager who risked his life to help injured neighbors, joins the fire department and eventually becomes chief, implementing new rescue techniques based on his storm experiences. These young heroes carry forward the lessons of the blizzard throughout their lives, creating a generation of leaders committed to community service. In the days following the blizzard, the city slowly begins to reconnect. You venture further, checking on neighbors who had been isolated, sharing supplies and exchanging stories of survival. Paths through snowdrifts are widened and reinforced, turning temporary tunnels into more permanent lifelines. With the storm finally subsiding, the animals of New York begin to emerge from their hiding places. Horses, weary but alive, step carefully through cleared streets, their breath steaming in the crisp air. Dogs and cats, once lost or trapped, return to familiar homes, guided by scent and instinct back to the warmth of human companionship. As the sun rises higher in the sky, crews of workers, volunteers, and neighbors begin the painstaking task of clearing the streets. Shovels, pickaxes, and horse-drawn carts move rhythmically through snowbanks, turning the frozen cityscape back into pathways of human movement. The work is slow but steady, each cleared block representing progress toward normalcy. After days of confinement, you begin venturing further into the city. Streets are still lined with high drifts, roofs sag under remaining snow, and icicles hang like chandeliers from every eave. Yet the desire to reconnect, to assess damage, and to resume life is stronger than the lingering chill. As you explore the streets after the blizzard, you discover the accidental artistry left behind by the storm. Snow and ice have sculpted trees, fences, and rooftops into fantastical shapes, while drifts form natural tunnels, arches, and glimmering mounds. The city has become a vast outdoor sculpture gallery, beautiful and temporary. In the days following the storm, shared meals become a comforting ritual across neighborhoods. Families and neighbors pool what little food remains, creating small gatherings in homes, tenements, and churches. Pots of soup simmer over stoves, bread is broken collectively, and the act of eating together rebuilds social bonds strained by the crisis. Once the streets are passable, attention turns upward. Snow-laden rooftops pose ongoing dangers, with the weight of ice and drifts threatening collapse even after the storm ends. You and other residents climb carefully, breaking and shoveling snow and reinforcing structures wherever possible. The work continues for weeks as the city slowly digs itself out. Finally, the postal system begins to function more reliably. Mail carriers, having braved days of deep snow and icy streets, resume more consistent deliveries. Letters, once delayed for days or weeks, arrive at doors, bringing news, reassurance, and connection to the outside world. The restoration of mail service signals that New York is rejoining the larger world. By the following week, New York City is stirring fully from its frozen pause. Snow still clings to rooftops, streets retain traces of drifts, and ice hangs like ornaments from every eave. But life has returned, cautiously, gradually, but unmistakably. The Great Blizzard of 1888 becomes part of the city's collective memory, a reference point for resilience and community spirit. The storm's victims are mourned and remembered. Monuments are erected to honor those who died and those who risked their lives to help others. Annual commemorations remind future generations that survival depends not on individual strength, but on community cooperation. Most importantly, the blizzard changes how New Yorkers think about their city and each other. The experience of shared vulnerability creates lasting bonds across social, ethnic, and religious lines. The lesson that wealth and status mean nothing in the face of a natural disaster becomes part of the city's moral foundation. The memorialization of the storm begins even before the last snow melts. Families who lost loved ones gather in churches, synagogues, and community halls to share stories and comfort each other. They discover that grief, like survival, is easier to bear when shared among many hearts. The city's first official memorial service, held at Trinity Church, brings together people who would never have met under normal circumstances. Mrs. Vanderbilt sits beside Mrs. Chen, the Chinese immigrant whose husband died delivering coal during the storm. Rabbi Goldstein speaks alongside Father O'Malley, their words of comfort transcending religious differences. The service becomes a model for how the city honors its dead, while affirming the living bonds that bind survivors together. Individual acts of remembrance prove equally powerful. Thomas Murphy builds a small shrine in his tenement's courtyard, where neighbors place flowers and mementos for those who didn't survive. Mary Kellerman stitches a memorial quilt, each square representing a person lost to the storm, each stitch a prayer for their family's healing. Dr. Davidson establishes a free clinic in memory of the patients he couldn't save, ensuring that lack of money will never again prevent someone from receiving medical care during an emergency. Dr. Morrison creates a training program for midwives and community health workers, inspired by the women who helped deliver babies during the storm when professional help wasn't available. The storm's heroes are honored in ways both grand and humble. Murphy O'Brien, the banker's driver who lost fingers to frostbite while saving a trapped family, receives a medal from the mayor. But the recognition that means most to him comes from the children of the family he saved, who visit him every week to help him with tasks made difficult by his injury. Police Sergeant Murphy, who led rescue patrols through the worst of the storm, is promoted to lieutenant and given command of the city's first emergency rescue division. His partner, Officer Silver, becomes his deputy, and together they develop new protocols for disaster response that emphasize community cooperation over authoritarian control. Mother Mary Catherine and her Sisters of Charity receive formal recognition from both the Catholic Church and the city government, but they're more proud of the interfaith cooperation they fostered during the crisis. The mission house becomes a permanent community center, offering services to immigrants and the poor regardless of their religious background. Anna Kowalski, the seamstress who organized her entire building for survival, is elected to the newly formed Tenement Safety Council, where she works to improve building codes and emergency preparedness in working-class neighborhoods. Her practical experience during the storm gives her credibility with both residents and officials, making her an effective advocate for change. The children who served as messengers and helpers during the storm grow up with a special understanding of civic responsibility. They form the first generation of storm children, New Yorkers whose character was shaped by experiencing community cooperation during extreme crisis. Many become teachers, social workers, firefighters, and police officers, carrying forward the lessons of mutual aid throughout their careers. Little Catherine O'Brien, the 7-year-old who swept Mrs. Muller's steps before the storm, grows up to become a nurse, inspired by the care she received and witnessed during the crisis. She specializes in pediatric medicine, ensuring that children facing medical emergencies receive the same kindness that saved her family during the blizzard. The storm's anniversary becomes an annual celebration of community resilience. Each March 11th, neighborhoods organize snow day festivals where people share food, help elderly neighbors, and tell stories about the blizzard to children born after the storm. The festivals recreate the spirit of cooperation that emerged during the crisis, making mutual aid a joyful tradition rather than just an emergency response. Schools incorporate storm stories into their curriculum, using eyewitness accounts to teach children about citizenship, cooperation, and courage. Students read Mary Kellerman's diary entries about sharing food with hungry neighbors, study Thomas Murphy's leadership techniques, and learn how Dr. Davidson and Mr. Chen combined Western and Eastern medicine to save lives. The most lasting memorial to the storm is the network of friendships and institutions that survive long after the snow melts. Mrs. Hartwell and the Rossini family remain close for decades, their children growing up bilingual and bicultural. The Interfaith Emergency Council continues to coordinate religious communities' responses to poverty, disease, and later disasters. Bank President Whitney and his driver Murphy O'Brien develop a friendship that transcends their employer-employee relationship. Whitney establishes a fund for workers injured on the job, while O'Brien becomes the bank's unofficial liaison with working-class customers, helping them navigate financial services with dignity and respect. The tunnel network, though temporary, inspires permanent changes in city planning. Engineers design subway systems with emergency passages and warming stations. Building codes require new construction to include emergency supplies and community gathering spaces. City planners prioritize connecting isolated neighborhoods to essential services. Most importantly, the storm creates a new understanding of what it means to be a New Yorker. Before the blizzard, the city's identity centered on individual achievement, economic success, and technological progress. After the storm, New Yorkers understand that their city's true strength lies in its people's willingness to help each other survive and thrive. This shift in values influences every aspect of city life. Political leaders who emerge from storm neighborhoods bring community organizing experience to city government. Business leaders who shared resources during the crisis support policies that reduce inequality. Religious leaders who cooperated during the emergency continue working together on social issues. The storm's lessons prove especially valuable during later crises. When economic panics threaten the city's stability, neighborhoods organize mutual aid networks based on storm time models. When disease outbreaks challenge public health, communities draw on their experience of caring for sick neighbors during the blizzard. When fires, floods, or other disasters strike, the city responds with coordinated community action rather than just official emergency services. The Great Blizzard of 1888 becomes more than a weather event. It becomes the founding myth of modern New York civic culture. The storm stories teach each new generation that true strength comes not from individual achievement, but from community solidarity, not from building walls, but from building bridges between different kinds of people. In quiet moments, when later storms threaten the city, elderly New Yorkers who lived through the Great Blizzard remind their neighbors, "We've survived worse together, and we'll survive this together too." Their voices carry the authority of experience and the promise of hope, proving that some lessons are too important to be forgotten. Thank you for surviving the Great Blizzard of 1888 with me. You've felt the sting of wind on your face, heard the creak of snow-laden roofs above your head, and witnessed a city brought to its knees by nature's fury. You've experienced the quiet heroism of neighbors helping neighbors, the simple miracle of warmth shared in desperate times. You've walked alongside Thomas Murphy as he organized his neighborhood's survival, shared Mary Kellerman's determination to help her community heal, and witnessed Dr. Davidson's dedication to saving lives regardless of personal cost. You've seen how little Catherine O'Brien's simple act of kindness created ripples of generosity that spread throughout the city. You've experienced how the storm broke down the barriers that normally divide people. Rich from poor, native-born from immigrant, one religion from another. In the face of nature's indifferent power, New Yorkers discovered that their survival depended on recognizing their shared humanity. As you settle into rest now, carry with you the image of those flickering candles in frosted windows, the sound of children's laughter echoing through snowy streets, and the knowledge that even in winter's darkest hour, the human spirit burns bright and unquenchable. Remember the lessons of the blizzard, that kindness multiplies in times of crisis, that ordinary people become heroes when circumstances demand it, and that communities united in common purpose can overcome any obstacle. If this journey through time moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more historical adventures, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Share what moment from the storm touched you most deeply, or simply let me know how this tale of survival and resilience made you feel. Did Thomas Murphy's leadership inspire you? Were you moved by the friendship between Mrs. Hartwell and the Rossini family? Did the children's courage remind you of resilience in your own life? Now breathe deep. Let the storm's fury fade into memory. Allow the peace of shared struggle and triumph to guide you into gentle, restorative sleep. The great blizzard has passed, and so may you pass into dreams as soft and silent as falling snow, warmed by the knowledge that human kindness burns eternal, even in the coldest winter nights.